Hi, and welcome to the Quick and Dirty Romance Podcast. We're your hosts, romance authors, and bicoastal friends for life. I'm Skye McDonald, author of the hockey goalie romance Scoreless.
And I'm Sarah Smith, author of No Freaking Way.
And together we are Sarah Skye, author of the best-selling Unlikely Pairing series.
Each episode will dive deep into what it's like to be a contemporary romance author. We'll talk writing inspiration, give you the inside scoop about the publishing world, chat about how we write those infamous sex scenes, and more. And then we'll pull out and wrap it up in 30 minutes or less, but we promise to leave you satisfied.
So if you haven't already read our books, be sure to check them out after you listen to this podcast and DM us with any questions or requests for future episodes that you might have.
So today we're talking about a very interesting and possibly controversial topic, and that's naming characters, specifically characters in our romance books.
Yes, absolutely. So please do not get your feelings hurt if we name your name. It was not intentional, and we are going to try very hard not to do that. We love all of you, and all of your names are beautiful, but we are thinking about how it fits into a romance novel, even though it should fit into your own romance, of course. So how do we as authors come up with character names? So I will say the impetus of this, I saw a TikTok of somebody reading aloud some romance books, which I don't know, she's very funny. But she reads like very cringeworthy things sometimes. And she was reading certain names that she felt did not vibe as love interests in a romance. So that is the impetus for today's conversation. How do we come up with our character names? Sarah, how do you name like all of your characters?
Okay, so admittedly, I don't have a very sophisticated process.
Okay.
I honestly, and this is going to sound ridiculous and very simplistic, but it's true. I just, I'll hear a name, whether I'm like out about in life, running errands, doing stuff, or like whether I'm watching a YouTube video or like a movie or something random, or maybe I'm reading like a book or an article or whatever, and a name, I'll come across a name and I'll be like, you know what, that's a cute name. That's a great name for this character that I'm working on, or like, ooh, that's a name that I haven't heard very much. And then I have an email in my or I have like a message in my email where I have just a list of like character names, and I'll go through and I'll put it in kind of like a master list, and just depending on what I'm working on, I'll go through it and be like, oh, do any of these like fit the character? So it's totally random. It's not, I know that some authors are very intentional, like certain characters, they want their names to mean certain things, or it's like a throwback to something, in like something that they read before, or to honor somebody or someone. And that's really, really cool. And I think that's great. But for me, most often it's just like random names that I think sound cute or sexy. And then I just put them in there. That's my process. What's yours?
First of all, I love the idea that you have a running list of names. I think at some point I tried that and then it fell apart. I very much approach the story and think about names that would best fit the character. I will very often go to like a baby naming index just to get like a long list of names, right? And I may do something even where like I want a name to have a specific feeling or a specific meaning behind it, right? So they're not like hidden meanings, but if I'm thinking about the character, I definitely want them to be somehow like attached to the character. So I'll look through either names that mean something, or like popular names or unpopular names, or like rare names, right? Because you don't always want you don't want to do necessarily the number one baby name in the world at the time, because it's pretty, like, you kind of want it to sort of stand out a little bit. So thinking about like different characters that I've named, I've definitely gone through like lists and like, what names do I fancy, right? Like which ones appeal to me and which ones don't, and kind of pulled from there. I was really thinking as you were talking about my character Melody in book 2, Off the Record, I really wanted her name to be musical, and it took a while for me to like narrow down what exactly it was going to be, but because it is such a music themed book, I definitely wanted that. So yeah, I don't often hear names in real life that I want to use. Is that true? Yes, I don't often hear like, oh, this is a really cool name. I want to put it in a book. If anything, I try not to put names into books of people that I do know, even though that's worked out in a really interestingly and almost like ironically coincidental way, which I'm not sure if that's a thing, but like when I started writing, I had two friends and they were dating guys named Benjamin and Will. And I was like, okay, this is weird because I promise I didn't know that before I started writing these romance novels with guys named Ben and Will. Um, so yeah, I guess overall, I just kind of look for names that appeal to me. Um, and then I kind of go from there. Like Nemesis. Okay, so Olivia in Nemesis. I like that name, Olivia. I like it quite a lot. She was initially just called like Jen or Allie or something like that, which are perfectly good names. But I wanted it to be a little bit more less universal for like, and I definitely think both names are lovely. I mean, I've got a major character named Jennifer in The Not So Nice Girl, right? It's a good solid name. There's nothing at all. But I wanted it to be a little bit more, I guess I would say bolder. And so when she kind of became like a full character that was going to have her own story, I moved her in, or I went and like did a look at list and I chose Olivia. It seemed right for her. But yeah, like I don't know, most of my names aren't terribly uncommon, but they're also not terribly common, if that makes sense. I don't usually use names that you would never hear, right? Like Storm or I don't know,
Yeah.
Thunder. I don't know, but like sometimes romance, especially male romance characters, can have like very, like almost unreal type of names like that. Storm, Ryder. Even I've seen Ryder, and that's not a name that I've ever thought of using. So yeah, yeah. I guess
That
I just kind of like go with the book and the vibe of the book.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. And the names that you brought up from your books, like because I've read your books and they suit your characters very well, very nicely. That's funny that you said with the names Ben and Will that because you had come up with those characters prior to meeting your
Mm-hmm.
friend with the boyfriends that had the same
Mm-hmm.
name. That's happened to me before because I'm the same. I don't really like purposely naming characters after people that I know. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously names are names. Everybody has a name. If you're going to write a book and name a character, there's going to be somebody in the world, multiple people that have that same name too.
Right.
But like yeah, that's happened to me where I thought like, oh, this is great. I don't know anybody by this name. This is perfect. And then like a month later, I'm like, well, I just met somebody and now you have that name and now it's kind of weird. But like I don't tell them because I don't want to make them feel like really creeped out or weird. You know? But because I
Yeah.
think there are names though that are like common, very common names, at least
Mm-hmm.
like in the US where we live. And like it's to the point where I've named characters very common names because those names are essentially like white noise to me. Like I could meet somebody with that name and it wouldn't weird me out because there's a gazillion people with that name. You know what
Are
I mean?
those your main characters or your side characters?
My main characters.
Like,
Yeah.
what's a good example of that?
Like, okay, so in my book Simmer Down, the main character, her name's Nikki. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's a super common name. I've always liked that name. I know that there's nothing like super unique about it, but like I've always thought that was a really cute name for a female character. And I know like a gazillion Nikki's. Or I've met a lot of Nicoles and Nikki's in my life. And it's not like none of them would be like, oh my God, this is based on me, isn't it? Because it's such a common name, if that makes sense. Do you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
I do. I do. I'm thinking about that. Like, it's funny. My girls tend to have a lot less common names. I mean,
Mhm.
Olivia is definitely a popular baby name these days. I would not say Melody particularly was, although I have met a few Melodies, and anytime I meet a Melody, I'm like, hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Celeste is definitely a very unusual name, for sure, for sure. I'm not even sure where I came up with her name. If you read the epilogue of The Not So Nice Girl, the 80s book, you see like how they named her, but I actually ended up making that up like on the back end. Um, but yeah, and then I have like Eleanor, and I don't know why that's her name. Like I can't tell you why that was her name, except I just knew that it was. Like,
Yeah.
it just came to me and I was like, that's the name. That's the name.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometimes, yeah, character names just come to you
yeah.
and it just works out really, really like, yeah, that's perfect. And sometimes, I don't know about you, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what to name this person. I have a placeholder name. I hate it. I can't think of anything else. And then I
Mm-hmm.
don't like, I've done what you've said that you've done going through baby name lists. I've done that a few times. But then I just feel like I fall down a rabbit hole of like, oh my God, I hate
Yeah.
this name. I hate this name. I hate this name. I hate all of these are terrible. And I don't
Yeah.
picking a name.
You know, a funny name for me was Megan because Megan initially just started as Liv's side character best friend. And I just gave her that name because it seemed like a perfectly nice name, right? But when I went to write her book, I looked into the meaning of the name and it actually means pearl. And I worked this whole thing into her personality and it actually sort of like in the reverse helped me create the person that she was. So that was an interesting kind of thing, but it is like there are many names that I would not use almost because they are so prolific here. They are so common to see. And again, like I'm aware that Olivia is pretty popular, but especially for young children now. But you know, like I have characters like Sam and Brian. Like these are like they're very common names, and yet I just like them. And I know we're gonna talk about dudes. Sort of, we're kind of going back and forth, but with my women characters, I really do try to look at if the name has occurred to me, I'll look into what it means more so I have better idea of like who they are and why I named them that. And otherwise I will go and pick one that like leans into the idea that I'm having. So yeah. What about dudes though? Like how are your guys?
That's okay. This is hard for me because obviously we write romance and I want a name that like okay, like you said the name Ryder, which is hilarious. Like of course his name would be Ryder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I've never used that name before. It's a good name, but with my male characters, I want them to have a sexy name, but not like like a weird sexy. I don't know. This is such a weird mental process that I go through
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of my main characters who are the love interest, the male love interest, like I don't think any of their names are like overtly sexy. It's just names that I think are kind of that I like, that I think are kind of
Yeah.
sexy. You know, like I don't really have a process. It's just kind of like, oh, I like that name. That name
Mm-hmm.
sounds good. Like that's his name. And it's more about not not naming them after any men that I'm related to. That is
Ah,
my big thing because that is just sorry, I'm probably like just showing what a complete weirdo I am, but like I think it's gross for me to write a story, a book, specifically a romance where there's going to be like steamy love scenes and then the male main character has the same name as like my brother or like you know what I mean? Like I think that
yeah.
that's disgusting. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to shame anybody or like make
Yeah.
anybody feel bad about their names. It's just for me as an author, that creeps me out and I just can't like I can't have that happen. So every male main character name I've ever come up with, it is not even close to what my brothers' names are because that again, it's my own thing. I just think it's gross and I just can't have it.
You know, it's funny. I'm with you. Despite the little story about the Will and Ben ladies, I mean, not like they weren't my boyfriends. But yeah, like my father's name is George. There is absolutely no freaking way we're going to put that name into a book. I don't even know if I would use that name as a side character. Although, of course, Dad is a side character in the Not So Nice Girl, but he goes by Mac. But I totally hear you. Like, I'm not going to put my uncles, like, I don't have any brothers, so I dodge that bullet. But, like, I'm not going to put my uncles' names into a book. Like, that's not going to happen. But it's funny with guys like, so like Ryder or Storm or something like that. Those feel to me, and no disrespect to anybody who uses them, they feel more like bodice clincher names, right? Like Fabio, right?
Mhm.
Like, this is not a name of a person I know, right? This is, and because we both write contemporary romance, I don't want it to be like a mundane name, but I do want it to be a name that like you could imagine saying, right? And that's kind of the lean in is what name can I think of that, or what name appeals to me, or what name fits this character, where it's not just like a romancy name. It's like a name that you could imagine sighing. I know my guys tend to have a lot of like sort of Anglo kind of names, like Ben, Will, and Nick.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I mean, we did our research. On Calder, like we had Calder Ross, which was, I researched that to make sure it was a good Scottish name. We had Marco, and so like thinking about like it, I really think, could this name be sighed or moaned by most people? And if it can, then I'm probably going to go with it, right? Like, I don't want it to be overly complicated. I don't want it to be overly formal. And I definitely don't want it to be somebody I know, right? Like, even if it's somebody I like, it's very odd. Like, it's very odd. So, for example, like some stories I've written, like I said, people come into my life who have those names. For example, like the name Brian, right? Brian is Sam's brother in The Not So Nice Girl, and he has his own book. But I know a Brian, and it's like, okay, that's kind of weird, but I just kind of go with it. The one thing that I won't do in that, like you were saying, I won't deliberately put in a name that is somebody that I knew already, right? If that happens by happenstance, well, then it's funny and weird. But like, I would never use the name Michael. I would never use that name. I would not use the names of ex-boyfriends, even for like D-bag characters, right? Like, I'm not going to put you into a book and name you. Like, that's not going to be a thing for me. Like, it's a little weird to me. So I'm just not going to go down that road.
No, I think that makes perfect sense because you're the writer, you're the author, you have to feel comfortable with your story. And if you are like naming characters after people that and that creeps you out, like that's not going to make writing the story very pleasant. And I totally get that. The one thing that I just realized I did this, and I've done it multiple times, is that my mom has a really unique name, and she had a very unique name, and it was kind of longer. So I've used parts of her name as a way to like name some of my characters in my books as a way to like honor her and to like have her memory live on. And maybe that's like a weird thing to do, but that is like something special that like makes me feel happy. I don't name the male main characters after her because that's weird. But and it's normally like a last name or a nickname type of thing, or like a side character. Like, so I think that's kind of fun, like to be able to do that. But yeah, like I am 100% with you. I cannot name the male main characters after any man that I'm related to in that way. That's like, gross. Sorry.
Yeah, like it just can't do it, right? It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to name like I said, after family members or like anybody I've dated or been married to, like if we know each other intimately, your name is not going to be in my book on purpose. I'll say that much. But yeah, so I don't know, like, and on that note, like names, I'm very funny about this because names to me in all of my books I use it every time as a graduated level of intimacy. Like, if you read my novels, you will see I'm very particular about names, right? And not just names, but what people are called, because I'm of the mind that what your name is shapes part of your personality. Okay. Some people think it doesn't matter what you're called, you are who you are, right? There are kind of different schools of thought on this. I think that you would be a fundamentally different person if your name was not Sarah, right? I think there would be things about your personality that would not be the same because people respond to you in a certain way because your name is Sarah. It's a subconscious thing. I think that is true of all people. Okay. So, to me, in the story, what the two characters are calling each other is reflective of how they feel about each other. So we'll take Not Suitable for Work as a good example. It's Mr. Addison and Miss Green. Mr. Addison, and then it's Celeste, and then it's Ben. And like, it just shows them getting more comfortable with each other. In Scoreless, Audrey keeps wanting to call him Paris because he's a teammate, right? Like he's a member of the team. They all go by their last names, whatever. And he's like, I want you to call me Quinn. And so she starts calling him Quinn, and then the walls come down, right? Like that level of like what it is you refer to somebody as in that sort of intimate way. Like, and it doesn't have to be like a nickname versus a full name. It can be like Luke and Megan, he calls her Pearl, right? That is on her online name, and that becomes his pet name for her, right? So like just the things that you call one another at various stages of your relationship to me is important. And it's another reason why the names are important to me, right? Like I would never be like, oh, I don't care what this name is. I mean, it may be like I'm very open to a variety of names and I'll go ahead and filter it down. But in the end, like their names matter. And then how they call each other ends up mattering to me. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that, I mean, that makes perfect sense. Names are such a fun way to like build a story or like deepen a character. I don't know, like it's a good way, especially in a romance, to explore a different dynamic or like create intimacy between the characters. So I completely agree with that. And that's why sometimes it's so hard to think of names, because you want it to be the right name. You don't want to gross anybody out. You don't want to gross yourself out. You want it to be fun and entertaining and like hot, you know?
Yeah, you want it to be hot, and it's hard because like I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but some names aren't that hot.
No.
Right? And so then like what do you do? Like, and that was the original post that inspired this conversation. Like there were names like, what's that character on that show? Sheldon, right? Like everybody thinks Big Bang Theory, right? Like I don't watch the show, so I don't know much about it, but like I'm aware of the like memes or whatever. It's just not a name you necessarily think of that you just want to like scream in bed, which is actually also mentioned in When Harry Met Sally, and I believe it is the same exact name, Sheldon. Okay, so I'm sorry to all the Sheldons out there listening. I'm sure there are hundreds of you.
Yeah, oh, sure.
Or to all the women married to a Sheldon, I'm sure that you scream their name, very, very satisfied every night. Get your girl, go, go, go. But just sort of on paper, it doesn't, you don't want to scream it. Like
No.
you don't feel like, oh God, Sheldon. Like you would definitely have to come up with a nickname. He would definitely need a nickname, right? And like if you wanted to go down that road, fine. But the whole point was like names that just don't work as male main characters, because we are painting, we've talked about this in many episodes, we are giving an ideal, right? And Sheldon is not a bad name. There's nothing wrong with the name, right? Don't be ashamed. But it doesn't flip into just like unbridled lust necessarily for most people.
Right.
For most people. And if it does for you, well done.
Yeah.
We are proud for you. We are so happy for you.
And you know what? That actually brings something, this is going to segue very nicely into my next point, is there are romance names or names in romance books for male main characters that are considered very, very hot and sexy that I cannot, it's just gross to me because, and an example of that is, okay, the name Josh is an extremely popular name in the romance.
Hating game.
The hating game, the friend zone, the roommate, like, and that's just a few. There are a gazillion other books where he is that's the male main character's name. It's a great name. That's my brother's name. Yeah. Right. So again, sorry, my brother's not listening to this, so whatever. I can but like, I just think that, and like I've gotten past it. I love The Hating Game. It's one of my favorite books ever. Joshua Templeman is freaking awesome. And that kind of helps too, because he goes by Joshua through a lot of the book. And my brother's full name is Joshua, but we all call him Josh or whatever. But yeah, like that name is forever ruined for me. Just can't. I will never have a Josh male main character, which sucks because people love a romance Josh. And it's a good name. It's a good name. There's nothing wrong with it inherently. It's just, it's my brother's name and vomit. Like I just can't, you know what I mean? Like I just can't. It's not, so I can't get on the Josh romance train because I'm related to a Josh, and it's forever ruined that name for me. And I know that sounds horrible, but that's just how that's just where I'm at right now.
You know, that's funny. That's not a name I would put as my male main character. Like, it's just not, there's nothing at all wrong with the name Josh or Joshua. It's a perfectly good name, but it is not a name that I would choose. Mm-mm.
Interesting.
Nope.
Okay, cool. Maybe that's why we're friends, because
Maybe it is. It's clearly the single common bond that we.
Yeah, that's it.
If all else fails, we can be team anti Josh. Except for your brother's perfectly nice, and all the Joshes are very nice.
Right.
Everybody's nice.
Right. Yeah.
But like no, I think I almost prefer like more old fashioned names, like I said, like Ben, Will. Like these are not like they're not archaic. It's not like Humphrey, but I don't know. There's a little bit. I don't know. Not quite so popular.
Right. No, and I get that. And because they're like regular sounding, everybody has heard of those names, and it's very easy to like get lost in a story with the name of a guy that like sounds that pleasant. I do have another question. What names give you the ick that you won't use in a story? Do you have any? I have a few, but like it's not even for any reason. It's just like I just can't imagine sexy things happening with that name.
Okay, that's what you mean. Not like bad connotation or like, oh God.
Right.
Okay. And names that I'm like say.
That's valid too. Like if there's a name of a person that, did something horrible to you, like I can understand why that name just, right. Yeah. Okay.
We're gonna leave that one alone. Let's see. Names that give me the ick that I'm like, oh no. Chad. Chad. Sorry, Chads. It's just Taylor may have ruined it. It might be Taylor's fault. Chad, Brad, both of those. Brad is a name that it's no, thank you. No Brads. I don't need a Brad. Trying to think because they sound like those are my two for now. Give me one. I'm sure I'll come up with some more.
All right. Brody. I hate that name so
Brody.
much.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to everybody who has that name. I'm so sorry. And you know what? I've used that name before, not for a male main character. I've used that for like a side character who just like is a douchebag and sucks and you like get horrible things. But I just can't. I don't know. There's just something about the name. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Brody is a good one. I think there's a movie from the 90s where the main character, Jason Lee's character's name was Brody, and he was very funny, but like it was not a name you would want. I used Brad in my upcoming book as a throwaway character. He's actually a D-bag. Other like names where it's just like, oh, you're not.
There's some weird names like old-timey names like Albert or Jasper or something like that. I can't.
Jasper is a hipster name. Jasper is a very hip name.
I'm so sorry.
But I would not name my character that.
Exactly. Like, how can you get wet for a Jasper? I'm so sorry. Like,
well, if he's got the beard, that way he might have a hipster beard, and then you're done. I'm actually not into hipster beards, but it's a lot of women are. Good for you, ladies. What was I thinking of? Jasper. I was gonna say like anything like Jebediah, like no, like Deep South,
God. Or like a
biblical. Yeah.
Here comes
Otis. I'm not gonna name a character Otis, although. Sex Education, the main character's name is Otis, and it works perfectly well. But like, I'm not gonna get damp thinking about an Otis. That makes me think of the Andy Griffith show, The Drunk on the Andy Griffith Show, right? Like real old time. I'm really that was my dad's in my thing, but like I just think of like old fat like hayseed kind of names. Like no, I don't want that. And I mean. And this is terrible because it's a perfectly nice name, and I know nice people named Derek, but I named Celeste X Derek, and after that, it gave me a total ick. Like, there are many nice Dereks. There are lovely Dereks. There's nothing wrong with that name, but I don't know why. It was just not. I was like, I need somebody who's going to really crush her, and so like now I'm like, oh, terrible name. And it is funny how when you write those characters into being. You end up with like an allegiance or like a hatred, right? Like, so in Liv's story, there's a guy named Cam, right? And if you know, but like Cam will never be okay for me. He's evil. But there's nothing wrong with a guy named Cameron, you know, he's perfect. And Cameron can be a great name. I mean, Cameron can be a super sexy name, but that to me, like, I have written the ick in, I guess I would say.
Yeah, yeah, that because like honestly, we're writing stories here, and they have to have like the characters have to have names, and some of the characters are gonna suck. So some of the names are gonna suck too.
Well, do you have like, okay, so on the other side of that, because the ick is so funny. It's like it's so specific, right? I'm sure that we actually have listeners right now going like, I love that name. Like, great. Like, we are really happy for you. It is not condescending. You know, this is our own like strange brains working. But on the other side of that, from your books, what are your favorite names that you have used?
Oh, good question. Okay, so I love Callum. Callum was
Mm-hmm.
my English love interest in Simmer Down. I love Callum. Max, I've always thought Max is like a really sexy, simple name. I've always liked that name. Gage, which is kind of weird, but like there's just something like different about it. I like that. Um, my hockey love interest, his name's Theo, which is kind it's like
Mm.
borderline D-bag name, but I'm like, he makes it work. I like that one.
I know a little kid named Theo.
Oh my
So I'm like, that would definitely fall into my writing bucket of like, I can't do that.
Okay, never mind. I ruined that for you. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. But that definitely is like a personal, like, I can totally love your book about Theo, but like for me to put a character into being, it's like, nope, not me.
Okay, what? How about you?
Okay, so my two favorite names are
Mhm.
bonded by the same last name, which are the brothers Luke and Quentin Paris. Okay, I don't know where I came up with the idea that the name Paris was a really cool last name, but I just decided it was. I think the last name Paris or Flowers are both really fun last names, just in general as a concept. So Luke and Quentin Paris, because those two names to me are so sexy. I don't know why they like ring my ears so nicely, but it's just like Luke. And then Quentin. I fell in love with the name Quentin in high school when I read The Sound and the Fury, which is a really effed up book. So like Quentin's no hero, but I just read that name and I just loved it. It's so romantic. And so Luke and Quentin Paris are my two favorite names that I've ever created, I would say, hands down. Yeah.
I love that. That's a good name. Luke is a good name. I know it has biblical beginnings and origins, but I mean, like, it's
And
such
Star Warsian.
right. Exactly. Yeah. Like, it's a name where like its origin doesn't really register to me because it's such like a normal name, and I
Right.
can get behind a hot Luke totally. Quentin
Yeah.
is very interesting. I like that though.
Yeah, it's unusual. And like I think it makes sense. You don't hear a lot of Quentin. I mean, not a lot. And you know, it makes sense that he's not American, I think. Like it's not particularly a French name or anything. I don't know if it's a French name at all, but it just kind of gives him like a sort of different kind of vibe. But yeah, I've always been in love with that name. I was thrilled to be able to use that name. It's been in my back pocket a long time. But yeah, those are my two favorite guy names. I guess my favorite girl name is probably Celeste, just because it's so different. You really don't see that except for in It Starts with a Kiss by J.L. Peridot, which came out at about the exact same time as Not Suitable for Work, which is how we got to really bond. As of course, she's a good friend of ours. Um, but yeah. Favorite names. I don't know. I'm working on a short story right now, and these names are fairly interesting. And then we have, like, I have new. I don't know. It's always fun to like see where they go, and sometimes you just don't know what their names are going to be until you get into it, and you kind of have to almost feel out like how the tempo of the story is going before you have a good fit. But yeah.
Yeah, names are fun. They're wild and weird and fun.
They sure are. They sure are. I mean, and they mean a lot to me, you know, personally. Like, I chose the name Skye for myself. Like, it is my name, but it was a name that I chose. So, naming, and it's so ironic almost because I love naming characters and myself, and I hate titling books. So, I don't know. I don't know what that means about me. Go figure. But this has been great for me. Was it good for you, Sarah?
Hell yeah, it was good for me.
Thank you all so much for listening to us ramble about the names that we love. If you like what you hear, please leave us a review on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you're deeply offended today, we humbly apologize. It was all in good fun. Now, go read our books. You can find us on Instagram at author Sarah Skye. I am on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at author Skye McDonald.
And you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at author Sarah S. We love to hear from you, so reach out and DM us with any questions or requests for future episodes.
Thanks again for listening, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.